So welcome to this really special conversation. I'm so excited to have Joanne Newborn all the way from the US to talk to all, well, we're going to talk today about using our voice and speaking up in our business or career. And Joanne is a leadership and lifestyle coach with more than 15 years experience in the corporate world. And I'm just going to let Joanne talk a little bit more about herself before we dive into the conversation. So, Joanne, I know that you've got a course coming up at the end of the month, so I know this topic is really important to you. So do you want to just talk a little bit more about your work and how this kind of feeds into what you do?
Absolutely. I spent many years in the corporate business world and I loved it. My focus was sales and marketing and management, and I've managed a lot of teams over the years. And about 3 years ago, I got my certification in coaching with a Jungian focus, as you know, we have similar backgrounds in that sense. And the one thing I really noticed is that people are always looking to someone else for leadership. People don't think about themselves as being the leader. And I saw this gap that was out there. And I really wanted to be able to work with people and empower people that were feeling frustrated and unfulfilled in their careers to be able to create this leadership mindset so that they could achieve their dream careers that they dream about. And a lot of this, especially when it comes to females, I will say it happens with males too, but not as much, is that we have been brought up and conditioned in a way to say, you know, be quiet, don't ruffle any feathers, let's not upset anyone. And that filters into people's careers as well. So if you're sitting in a boardroom, you know, with a group of people, a lot of times people will just stay silent and let the people that they believe are leaders speak. And it's really robbing companies of these beautiful talents that people have. So I really wanted to focus on, you know, showing people how important it is to be authentic and speak up and find the strength and empowerment in yourself to have the courage to put yourself out there. Because when you put yourself out there, it's vulnerable. You might get criticized, you might be judged, you might upset some people. So that's where I'm at right now. So thank you.
And this is where I think our work is so beautifully aligned, because I am also got the Jungian coach training and background like yourself, but I train people in actually how to use this instrument, this incredible instrument that we all have. So, you know, I think that having the mindset, and I totally agree with you. I was in the corporate world before I started doing any sort of voice teaching, and I used to feel the same. I'd sit in meetings and I would let the managers or the directors or the leaders be the ones to speak, because I would think, well, I don't really know anything. They know more than me. But I totally agree with you. And I think that happens so frequently. So for me, this is really important. It's empowering women, not only in their mindset and how they approach this space, but also then from my perspective, how do you actually use your voice? And I think also we'll talk about this later, but how I see this shows up for women in their voice and the kinds of women that I end up working with, which there's a lot of commonalities there. So I guess the first question then, which you've kind of already alluded to in some of what you've just said, but why do you think speaking up for women in particular, because I would agree with you, is so challenging? And I suppose for me, speaking up could be asking for a raise, asking clients for higher fees, having difficult conversations or initiating difficult conversations if you're a manager and you've got to performance manage someone, for example, or even putting boundaries down and saying no, or asking for what you want, expressing what you want. What from your perspective do you think are the challenges for women with that?
Well, this is so vast.
I know.
I could talk about this for an hour in itself.
So when one sentence, no.
What I alluded to was our past and our upbringing and the way females are sometimes regarded, or even males. What were we told? That's become part of our unconscious mind, that becomes our own voices in our minds now of, don't ruffle any feathers, don't upset anyone, don't speak up, no one wants to hear what you have to say, why do you think that that's a good idea? And all of this chatter is going on in people's minds when it comes to stepping outside of their comfort zone, because that's where they're comfortable, to take a risk and speak up and say something. And that's really where it stems from. And I wanted to even comment on what you were saying about voice and vocal. Even if someone says, okay, I'm going to start speaking up now because I should do that, no one may even actually hear them because their voice is so low and they don't have the courage and the power behind it. But it really is so vital to be successful in your career, to be able to speak up, that it's just so important. Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing from the Jungian perspective and what we both have been trained in and teach is, I think fundamentally we're all wired for survival. And so anytime we threaten the status quo, anytime we do step out and potentially, as you say, ruffle feathers, potentially upset people, that is a threat to our ego, because the ego wants to keep us in our comfort zone, in what it knows is safe for us. And so I think that's why, and we have a real visceral reaction. I mean, I remember once years ago having to go and talk to a staff member that was not behaving properly. And I remember literally, I could almost feel my heart beating in my chest. And it was so uncomfortable for me to have a confrontation with this person. And it's just that ego is like saying, no, Anuska, go back. This is dangerous. And I think the problem is that we interpret that as that means I should come back. I should pull back. Because if my heart is going and my throat is closing up, and if I can't get the words out, that means I shouldn't be speaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you had any experiences yourself in that way, or have you worked with people that have had similar experiences like that?
Oh, definitely. I can give you a couple of examples from my own career. I remember starting with a company, and I didn't, I was trying to get the lay of the land and see how people interacted with each other. And I was in a high level position. And I remember a couple of VPs coming to me saying, you're a director. You need to get out there and tell people what you're thinking. And I didn't realize that people were noticing that I was holding back. So they were even pushing me out there to say, speak up more. However, when you do, like you said, that's when people can disagree with you. They can be confrontational with you, and it feels very scary. And I remember being in another role where I did put my ideas on the table, and they were scrutinized every single week. It was a weekly meeting, and to the point where I would say, I'm safer to just not say anything. Can I get through this meeting once a week unscathed without being noticed? Is there somewhere I can hide? And there was nowhere to, physically hide. We were sitting at a conference room table, but can I make myself as small as possible so I can get through this hour-and-a-half meeting without being attacked? And like you said, it feels awful. Your heart's beating, lots of emotions are going on inside of your body.
Yes.
But I wasn't doing myself a service, and I wasn't doing the company a service either.
Yes. And I think one of the things that I have learned through this Jungian work is that really all of this sort of visceral reaction, which is very real, and I do get that, and certainly as someone that sings on stage, it's very, very real. I think it's really understanding that ego part of our mind isn't who we really are. And I think what happens is we believe that that is the truth. So I shouldn't be speaking, therefore I'm just going to not speak because I'm having this actual visceral reaction in the moment. So therefore I'm just going to, as you say, how can I hide in this situation? I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
In some shape or form. And we really, as you say, are doing ourselves a disservice, but also the companies and businesses as well, because our opinions and thoughts and ideas are just as valid as anyone else's. So we've sort of mentioned this a little bit already, but just want to talk a little bit more about this idea of what we kind of notice are perhaps some of the themes with women in particular, let's say, in terms of, you talked at the beginning about leadership and, you know, looking to other people. And I think particularly as women, we are conditioned to see men as leaders. Certainly I was. I think it's actually only been in the last few, well, probably in my initial kind of corporate career, I think I only ever had male bosses anywhere I worked. And so I think there is that sort of, whether it's conscious or not, we do see ourselves as sort of, dare I say it, second-class citizens in that sense. And it might be unconscious. We might think, no, I don't, you know, but actually we do look to men for their opinions and what does the man at the table think? So what are your sort of, what have you experienced yourself in that space? And also what do you notice with some of your clients in that space?
Well, I have a funny experience to share because the industry that I had been in for a very long time was a very male dominated industry. And it's interesting, there were times where I was very unaware of it because sometimes it actually worked in my favor, but there were other times, the higher you get on the ladder, that's when you really start to stand out and notice. And I remember I was flying to Vancouver to meet the CEO of the company, and I was the only female. We're all in suits, and all the male colleagues were descending upon the CEO and introducing themselves, and I'm standing there with this small little voice, which you can probably speak to, of like, I'm Joanne Newborn, with my hand outstretched. No one's noticing me, and one of my colleagues physically pushed me into the CEO. So that I would be noticed. And I know he was doing it in a good way. He wanted me to be seen, but I was so embarrassed and I felt so much shame around, you know, being pushed into the CEO because no one was noticing me at all. And I realized that was a wake-up call for me of I needed to find this voice, what you really teach, to be heard and seen so that that never happened to me again.
Yes, absolutely. And so I suppose from my perspective, I mean, there are, and I'm obviously massively generalizing here, and obviously every person is individual, but if I was to generalize it into two camps, there are women who, let's say, are in a male dominated world, whatever that industry might be. And so they almost take on some of the sort of male persona characteristics, certainly with voice. So they can have a very, I'm thinking in my mind, like Margaret Thatcher, you know, very male in her energy. She even had voice work to lower her voice, almost to become a man as much as she could. And I do think I see that with certain women in certain industries nowadays, that they will deliberately lower their voice. They want to sound more kind of masculine. But as we know with the Jungian work, that's a persona. And then what goes into the shadow is this more emotional, more feminine, more, even I would say almost creativity, intuition, that sort of more feminine side. And so they will come to me because they can't access that sort of other side of themselves. And they're very much in this persona of, I'm in a male world, and this is how I need to kind of behave and be, and that translates into the voice. And also from a voice perspective, that can mean potentially a lot of strain, a lot of tension, a lot of fatigue in the voice, particularly if they artificially lower it, because the voice isn't meant to be often as low as some women will lower their voice. So they end up with all these problems. So that's one thing I see, and you might want to talk to that in a minute if you know of any, if you've had any experiences of women in that sort of, with that persona, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other side of the coin where women have that, and I think this is probably more common in terms of my work, where women have that weaker, quieter, almost very apologetic voice. And my work, and then in the shadow, is this powerful, successful leader that is desperate to kind of come out, but there's some real fear around letting that woman out. And so my work is really literally unleashing that voice. So what are your, I mean, obviously I work purely on a voice perspective, but do you notice those two sides of the same coin in your work?
Absolutely. In fact, now we're seeing with more diversity and inclusion happening that companies are really focusing on putting more women into higher level roles. And what I've noticed over the years is that women, like you said, take on this persona and they just really become a man in a skirt is what I like to say. Yep. And like you said, they're just tapping into those masculine qualities, which aren't bad qualities, they're good qualities to have, but the pieces of us that make us so special as females and what we can bring to the table with bringing our emotions. Like emotions are supposed to be just completely ignored and covered up. I'm sure people have heard people accuse them of being, oh, you're being emotional, yes. You know, when they're really actually being passionate about something, they feel very strongly about something, they have a conviction that they're trying to bring to the table, and they're told, you know, they're shut down. I've been shut down. You're being emotional. Take that out of there. Leave the office. Come back when you can be less emotional.
Yep.
And so we shut that piece of ourselves down because we think that's what we're supposed to do. And now these women, and I've done it myself, are just making decisions exactly like their male predecessors. And it's not actually helping the company. It's not giving this diversity that everyone's talking about. Like, we want to really bring like the diversity to the table, yeah. So that these gifts, these wonderful gifts that we possess, and you said this leadership within us can be there. And instead we're just putting this mask on of like, this is what I'm supposed to be. And these are the decisions I should make because that's what the leaders before me did. And it's not, we're just kind of a hamster on a wheel running around in circles, basically.
Yes. And I think the key part of this is there's nothing wrong with some of those masculine qualities, and there's nothing wrong with showing emotion and expressing that. And I think it's being able to, from this work, it's really being able to choose how you show up versus I have to wear this mask in order to feel safe, in order to feel secure, and actually not being afraid, if you are more on the same masculine end, not being afraid to show more of those feminine emotional kind of qualities. And if you're on the other side of the coin, not being afraid to maybe ruffle some feathers and maybe be quite authoritative and express some strong opinions. But I do agree, I think for a man, that is far more, it's so much more normalized for a man. And a man is sort of strong and powerful, he expresses opinions, and a woman is kind of hysterical and emotional.
But the irony is that I see men be quite passionate and emotional in the workplace, and that's okay, you know, like, and it sometimes it takes the form of abusive behavior, and that's even been normalized.
Yes.
And it's almost like we can't say it back to them, stop being so emotional right now. Yeah. It's really interesting, but I would love to know how you work with people to help them to develop this voice and go into that space internally.
So the way I work with women is, first of all, help them identify this persona that they have created. And I look at that initially through the voice that they've created. So are they on the weaker, quieter, softer end, or are they on the more, let's say, aggressive, more masculine end of the voice? And then I will work with them on finding some sort of middle ground with the voice and really opening up the voice in both directions. So they have access to sort of softer dynamics. They have access to stronger, more powerful voice. But really, from my perspective, using Jung's work is really them understanding the persona they've created and them then working through the shadow that they've rejected. And why is, say, being a leader such a threat? Why is being visible such a threat? What is it? What's the feeling that is so terrifying? What's really holding that in place? And so that's a big part of what I do. And I think also when we start to understand that everything is a mirror of us and everything is a reflection of us, when we look at the people that trigger us, normally the women that say have a very sort of weak, quiet, timid voice are triggered by people who are, let's say, more pushy and more aggressive and more authoritative. And so we examine, you know, what kind of person is like that? How could you, bringing in a little bit more of that into your world, actually allow you to show up more fully, more authentically? So it's really, I guess, looking at what they've created and what they've pushed away. And we do that with the voice. So I'll just basically work with the opposites in their voice initially, and then help them find some middle ground which feels kind of authentic to them.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And so what's some of the advice that you give to your clients in terms of, for example, they want to show up more powerfully as a leader, they want to step into a leadership role, for example?
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I have very specific steps that I follow, and yet it could feel like they're not doing much of anything. But when we come back and see where they started and where they came to, it's so subtle, but then you go, wow, I've come so far. So first, I like to start with their vision of what it is. Where do they really want to be in you know, the immediate future and then the far future? And let's pick one to focus on. What is the vision of your dream career, or where you'd like to be from a leadership perspective? And when we start with the vision, then we can start to observe the things that are coming up that are keeping them comfortable, the limiting beliefs that they have, the fears that are arising. A lot of times I find that people are blaming other people in the office for their lack of success. Well, so-and-so always speaks up, and so-and-so always says what his or her ideas are, and I never get a chance to. And so I like people to start just observing this and then thinking about, okay, this divine self, this image that you have of yourself, of where you want to be. Observe both, and then we start to close the gap. We put together a real action plan. I like little tiny baby steps because it's too much for our minds. If I just say, okay, now go and do this, we'll hit resistance. They'll, you know, start to procrastinate. So teeny tiny little baby steps of stepping outside of that comfort zone. Just try this today. Maybe speak up once in this meeting, this 90-minute meeting that I did. Speak up once and see what happens, and be okay with getting people upset. Just sit there and feel that and know nothing happened. The world didn't end because some people got upset about what you said. So just taking those little tiny baby steps until we can get to something that's really going to be big and stepping outside of their comfort zone. And that could be asking for the raise, asking for the promotion, walking into the president's office to give the president of the company your ideas, like doing something really bold after taking these baby steps. But it really starts with the observation. Observe how all these things are really igniting your fears, and that the outcomes aren't as scary as you think they are going to be.
Oh, totally. And it's interesting you say that, actually. And when I work with people on their voice, and anyone that's worked with me would be like, yeah, she does this. I'm always asking people how things feel in their body when they're using their voice. Where do they feel vibrations? You know, what are you feeling when you say that? And because so many of us are so detached to our voice, we don't even know where we feel things. We don't even really know what's moving. Oh, I didn't know my tongue did that when I did that, or I didn't know my lips didn't really move, or I didn't know my jaw barely opened, or my shoulders hunch when I speak. Or so in a similar way, I get my clients to start to really be with their voice, really observe it, and not from necessarily listening, because from my perspective, actually, and it's so interesting how this interconnects with Jung's work, but it's really more powerful to feel your voice than to hear your voice. So I'm far more interested in what people feel physically and emotionally when they use their voice than what they listen to objectively on a video, or because that's far more valuable. Because ultimately, if your voice feels terrible but you are creating a good sound, it can only go so far with that voice. So I want your voice to feel amazing when you use it, versus I'm just trying to create a sound and I don't really care what I have to do to get the sound. So anyway, that was a long-winded, I just suddenly thought, yeah, I do that, but I hadn't realized. Well, I had realized, but I'd forgotten that I do that.
It's amazing when we start to become aware.
Yes.
Because I think most people are just walking through life asleep, letting our unconscious conditioned mind run the show. And then we start to spark this awareness of physical body, feeling, observations of the mind chatter. It's like we're waking people up. And
totally.
It's fascinating.
Totally. So you've got is it a course that you're running, your Speak Up course? Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I know you've got a special offer, which I will post more details below the video, but do you want to just talk a little bit more about that for those people listening?
Yeah, fantastic. I am teaching a course. It's called Speak Up, Quit Hiding in the Shadows and Step into Your Leadership Potential. It will be 4 live classes with a Q&A after, so I can do live coaching with people. We can talk about the issues that are coming up as they start to go through this work and step outside of their comfort zone. There's also going to be a group for 5 weeks for further questions, and there'll be a one-on-one coaching session with me, so that we're kind of touching all the different areas so that they feel really complete when the course is over. So it's a 5-week course, and yes, I'd like to offer a special discount to the people that are here live, and I know you're going to put the link in the when this is posted. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. But we can start to tap into that leadership potential that you've been dying to have come out, and you just don't know how to bring it out.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Absolutely. So yes, I will put more details below, but you can also contact Joanne if you have any specific questions, versus contact me, because I won't know the answer. Yeah. Now also I will put a link below. I'm offering I don't normally do one-off voice sessions, but as a special for people listening to this, and also to support you if you do decide to do Joanne's course, actually how to use your instrument that is your voice. So it's a special one-off hour sort of voice intro session. So I will put the link below for that too, and you can schedule that in if it's something of interest, but it will be a limited time only. It's not an open-ended offer. So I will put the link below. Now, Joanne, you said at the beginning someone had a question from one of your social pages.
Yes. So this was a great question, and it's definitely one that is for you. So the question is, how can I create music that carries what is in my heart and soul. I imagine this comes first from sound and tone, and then lyrics. For example, I'm deeply moved by certain music, even when I don't understand the lyrics. So do you have techniques to help create from heart and soul?
Big question. I could probably speak for an hour on this, but I will try and keep it short. So first of all, I think in order to write music or anything creative from your heart and soul, you have to connect to your heart and soul, which sounds kind of obvious. And so you kind of touched on the fact that certain music touches you. And I think that's a really good place to start, because there's no right or wrong. So I think it's really getting in touch with that soulful part of yourself, however you have to do that, whether it's meditation, whether it's being in nature, whether it's listening to certain music that you feel almost like your heart expands. Like for me, being in nature, I feel that. For me, listening to certain music, I feel that. I also think, and this is just my own personal opinion as a songwriter myself, I feel like really I'm not a big fan of following rules, just generally. But in terms of, I don't follow any songwriting rules. I think intuitively, when you follow your heart and your soul, you kind of know what works. And so I think there are some rules from a sort of music theory perspective, and I don't know how much you know about music theory, about chord progressions and harmonies, those types of rules. But I think outside of that, from a creative perspective, really just allow your mind to kind of just, sorry, not even your mind, allow your heart to kind of take over and write, because the songs that I have been writing don't follow any kind of normal patterns, but they are coming from my heart, versus I think there are songwriters out there that, and I've got a book actually myself, so I used to be this person too, that will try and write songs based on what we think people want to hear. So it has to do this, it has to do that, it has to start like this, these are the chord progressions that work, this is how it should sound. So I encourage you, I guess, to get in touch with your heart and your soul, however you do that. And then whatever your instrument of choice is, sit in front of it. And I just sit in front of the piano and I just start making sound. And don't be afraid for it to sound like a mess. Don't be afraid to play, because creativity, this is what it's all about. So maybe let go of it having to look a particular way and just see what kind of comes out. But I do think you have to connect to that deeper part of yourself first. So
yeah, I love that you said that, because when I'm working with my clients, and this is not about music, it's about people's careers and leadership, I constantly say, what makes your heart sing? And it sounds very strange when it comes to business or career, but it starts in the same place. If you want your dream career, you need to start with makes your heart, what is it that makes your heart sing, and not what society told you that you're supposed to be doing. That's why most people are unhappy, because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I would imagine the same would be with music and songwriting. It's like, well, I'm supposed to follow this pattern, and then a song will be created, but I don't really like it because we're not connecting with our heart. So I love that you said that.
And also you'll find most likely that other people won't connect to it either, because you're writing for what you think people want. And I always remember Ed Sheeran being interviewed, and for years he was writing songs before he became ridiculously famous. And he said the big change for him was he stopped writing songs for other people. He said, I was trying to write what I thought record companies wanted. And it was such a powerful thing. And he said, as soon as I started writing what I felt connected to, my whole career took off. Now, I'm not promising your career is going to take off, but it's that idea. And I think it really is. It's having the courage to actually just do what moves you, whether it's in your business or career or songwriting or whatever, versus I have to do what society says or the songwriting book says or the songwriting course says, you know, this is how you write a song, and if you don't do that, it's not going to do very well. I personally don't subscribe to that. I think as long as you've got some basic musical knowledge, follow your heart, even if it seems crazy to everyone else.
I love it. Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much, Joanne. This has been so interesting. I think we could have talked about this probably all afternoon, but I felt we kind of had to keep the conversation curtailed to some extent. But it's been so great chatting to you.
Same.
And yes, so please do check out Joanne's course, details below. Contact her if you have any questions. If you'd like to book in a voice session with me, have a look at the link below. And yes, I'm really excited to see this course unfolding.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this together. I loved it. It was just fantastic. And I feel enlightened. I learned so much from you. So it was a great discussion.
Thank you so much.